We joined the church, because it was actually about 200 meters from our house. So we'd been driving past, it was at a little sort of primary school in Craigavon, and we'd been driving past, for a few Sundays looking for other churches. We'd driven to a few, much bigger churches in the area. And then the one Sunday we were coming back from church and we see this little sign, a vinyl sign. You remember in those days they used to put out vinyl signs fluttering in the wind. We thought, hey, there's a church here. Why are we driving to? We'd driven to Pretoria. We'd driven to, all sorts of different parts of the city. And the next Sunday we came back. I think we're a few minutes late for the service that Sunday. But I remember us, walking. We had Bongani at that time. He was about 9 months. And we just walked into the church, and I remember there was a few guys outside with, wide smiles and very welcoming. And honestly, we've never left. That's been our story.
Yeah, I don't know if it was the same time, but we've been
joined around 2004 as well.
No, I think it was 2001.
Okay.
We've been here about 25 years. I always benchmark it of Tristan's age. And he was about 3 months or 4 months, I think, so he's very young. We came from a church background, but had also been very committed in a church, but I would call it a church that was, no church is perfect, but it was a failed church. It almost became like cultish. There was prolific sexual immorality and unfortunately a lot of manipulation. And I think the churches try to help that. We exited that situation. Luckily, God guided Claire and I to exit that properly, above board in a sense, and with the permission. But then everything broke out a few weeks after we left. And I was in a situation of, I didn't want to go to church again then. So I was in my early 30s when Claire came here by invite. A friend invited. And yeah, we've been here for 24 years or 25 years in the church.
Let me ask you a question. I mean, for us, the assimilation was quite different because we'd come from Uganda, and we came from a very vibrant, big church. I think 2,000 people in the congregation. So coming to this place at the time that we joined, I think there was maybe 30 people.
I was going to say 20, just over 20 odd people.
So how did you guys find that shift?
It was fine. I actually preferred it, although I sat there with skepticism because seeing Tony and thinking, well, this is genuine. Yeah. And what's nice after the 25 years is that the word genuine has remained and is part of the fabric of the church. Which you don't always find. I find in Christian circles, there's a genuineness, and so whatever I think we do here, it's with that unique genuineness.
Yeah.
But the assimilation was, we actually preferred that it was smaller, to build relationship, but we'd come from probably 2,000 members, so it wasn't maybe a mega church, but had come from Rhema as well. Yeah. It grew up in Rhema. So.
Yeah. You've touched on building relationships. So I think one of our early challenges was building relationships. And it was challenging from a number of natural reasons. First of all, we found that a number of the core part of the congregation sort of knew each other, had moved up from Natal together. There was that whole connection. And we obviously were from a completely different background, so that was interesting for us to build the relationship. The second thing that was challenging for us was obviously the culture. When we did the initial, sort of FCC Bryce, all people spoke about was cricket. I know nothing about cricket. And no one knew anything about soccer, which is what I was interested in, right? So how did you find the cultural?
No, it was very much aligned to what we experienced. But I can imagine in your situation, it was quite a contrast. But then what made you stay? Because I can imagine a foreign national is one, our history is another, church is another, the size, the style. There's multiple cultural elements. And I can almost imagine they were all challenged at some stage.
Yeah, they all were. I think at the time we joined, there was maybe 3 other black people. I think one other foreign national, and one black South African couple. So from all sorts of dimensions, it was challenging. And honestly, if I'm to, we were sure that this was a God thing. We felt God added us to this church. Yeah. It wasn't something that we would naturally have chosen for the various reasons. And we were prepared to give it a try, and we were always open-minded. But very soon after we had that first service, we joined a home group. In fact, I think it was a launch of a couple of home groups, like literally the next Thursday after we joined. And we went to this one home group meeting, and there was a guy, I don't remember if you remember that couple, I don't know if you remember that couple, Vimpy, and his wife was Brazilian, I think. Do you remember that couple?
No.
They were a youngish couple. Anyway, after the home cell meeting, the guy walks up to me and he says, listen, as we were praying at the close of the meeting, I saw a picture of a ship coming into harbor. And the ship comes into harbor and drops anchor in that harbor. And for some reason, I felt that picture was for you, and that's why I'm walking up to you to tell you. And I remember in that moment, knowing God is saying, this is it, and you're to sink anchor here.
Yeah.
And so we thought, let's be obedient to God, and let's do what we think He's telling us to do. And the more we pushed in, I remember having a coffee with Tony not long after. He came out to visit me at my workplace, and we had coffee. And he asked me if we were going to commit, and were we going to stay long term? And I said, yes, we will, but are you going to commit to us? Are you committed to us? Because we are different. We're different than the rest of the congregation, right? And I think as we committed, and as the congregation at the time committed to us, it became more of a natural fit.
Wow.
Yeah. And from your perspective, did you find that there was any differences or was it just a natural click? You felt like couples were at the same, sort of stage in life? Business people were sort of aligned with what you were doing. What differences?
Well, in the beginning there wasn't really a business link, but obviously there is now. It was through the children and family. So that was our link, and the children were young. The rest of the families were similar ages, in their 30s with young kids, mid to late 30s. I'll never forget, you spoke about that little hall that we were in. There must have been 25, 30 people there. And I remember when I felt God had settled us, I felt so settled that one day when Tony was preaching, I stood up while he was preaching and said, I think you're right, and this is the reason why I think you're right. And I had a conversation while he was, and he was very gracious, and he managed it. I just thought, he wouldn't do that today, but it was one of those things that were just genuine and landed for us well.
You speak about kids and the relationships that have come from that. I mean, as I was thinking about this conversation, the one thing that I was thinking about was how beneficial it's been for us as a family to be in community with other committed believers that have children and are raising them in the right way. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's for us, it is probably the foundation. We get a lot of people who go, even from the home cell or whatever, you're so lucky when they know who the kids are, but they grew up in the church, and it was something that I've seen in the eldership consistently is important, but in Tony and Susanna from the very beginning. I'll never forget, and it's why Claire and I probably got involved even in the kids' church. But there's a few milestones that I'll just hit on around children, and tell me if you had a similar experience. But in the earlier days, you can have children who are disruptive, and you miss out on the service, and you things like that. And I remember Susanna often saying, just if they're babies, put them under the chair, and if they cry, you get up and do something. But you come to church, and God wants you to be in the church. Now that philosophy, I've seen people come and go in the church, but the ones whose families get mostly, and God will bless us wherever we're at,
Right.
but where I've seen most of the blessing is when the parents realize that almost tripartite alliance between father, a mother, and God, and the church sort of thing. And the kids, whether they're disruptive or not, we go to church, and things will change. Then the kids get a little bit older, and I don't have friends, and I don't know what to do, and you stay in the church because God will guide them, and they'll learn. Then you get a little bit older, and it's in the teenage years. Yeah, but I don't want to do this, and I can't do that, there's cliques and things like that, which is human nature, and you just keep them. I've got some of our best friends in our community who I've grown up with. I've known him for 50 odd years. I remember their daughters. Actually, it's Katie, because she's marrying
your son.
Yeah, my son.
Right.
And the church marries people. It networks them. It gives them skills. It helps them in business. It helps them in life. It is unbelievable. But I remember Katie because she was in our kids' church. Yeah. And she didn't know what she wanted to do, and then she was working the sound desk a little bit and irritated because she had to come to church. Steve and she said, we're going to church. We go to church. And it's amazing. Now she's integrated. And I remember then when the kids left school and they started work. I even remember with Christy where there was major opportunities, and I thought in my heart I was wishing a career for her in singing. You know what I mean? And this opportunity was so good that I thought she must pursue it. And she was so amazing. She took counsel from the elders. I said no to it. Stayed in the church, and I thought, what is the church going to give her that some professional singers couldn't?
Which is her passion.
Yeah, and I can honestly say as a father, I get goosebumps, but I can thank the Lord God Almighty that she took their advice, not mine, or my wishes. Not that I was forceful, and went, because the church, the gift of singing and music and editing and sound and the business principles that you learn have blessed my family immensely. Yeah. And I suppose the smallest thing happened to me this weekend. We've got the grandkids, and Christy and Mark's eldest little boy, James. He's watching Bluey, a cartoon. And Bluey and the mom and dad, lovely little program, kids program, and I'm watching it with them. And it's about Sunday and what they're doing on Sunday. And Charles, our grandson, turns to me and says, Grandpa, why aren't they at church? Okay. And it struck me, 25 years of just guiding. God doesn't force us to do things, but just guiding the blessings that come to children, to parents, to grandparents, to friends, to community, to the town that raises our kids in a church environment. And to grandkids is generational and unbelievable. I mean, it's Stu,
I don't think we've spoken about this over the years, but two things stand out for me about this journey that we've all walked together. I remember before we moved from the Four Ways High School Four Ways High School hall to the across the road to the Monte Casino. I remember I had a town hall at church, and we were chatting, and one of those evening prayer cafe sessions, and you stood up and there was a bit of unrest, because I think people were unhappy, they were worried about we're going to get a bit bigger, and we're enjoying this small little cozy thing. And I remember you standing up and saying, this church is an inheritance for our children. Yeah. And everything that we do here, we should keep our children in mind. And at that point, I mean, our children were very, very young. Our children are, a few years behind your children. And I remember wondering, what does he see, and how does he see this? How does he know that all of this is going to play out? But as we've walked the journey, I mean, we've been in the church, you've been 25, we've sort of come into 23, 22, and I have seen God's blessing most materially manifest through the children. One other thing that we haven't spoken about much, I don't know if you remember, in those days when our kids were teenagers, we used to come to your house for Bryce. And, and I remember between the Kings and us, our children were at about the same age, and we were grappling with teenage, and we wanted to choke them and kill them, literally. And I remember you and Claire always saying, just calm down, it's a phase, they will come through it. And that was so helpful for us, so helpful for Alan and I to have proper perspective, and of course to look and see where your own kids, were kind of coming out on the other end of the teenage years and coming into their 20s and loving God and serving in the church. And so we are so truly grateful for this wonderful community and for the opportunity that we've had to raise our children in the safety, in the clarity, in the firm foundation of the church community. And for you as well, for me, just to give you to let you know how much of a role you've played in helping to reinforce and guide us as parents. The guys who have gone before us, yourself and Claire and Tony and Susanna, we have such a wonderful example, We've seen you guys raise your children, not force them, not push them, not set some unrealistic expectations of holiness and so on that you often see in the church, and which very frequently pushes away young people. So well done to you guys.
Well, I mean, you brought up a point, and it's so valid. We talk like this as fathers and family members. Our spouses would say the same, but I think sometimes people think, oh, so you're lucky because you brought them up in the church and then you had no trouble with them. And you very lightly touched on the teenage years. So, this is the point. Our kids still get exposed to all sorts of things that are out there. The drugs, the pornography, the gangs, and they get exposed to it to the degree that there are children, and our children have had to face it and been drawn in by it. But the church and the town that we live in, guided by God, I think, steers us through difficult things, and that is a great support. I think as there's many young parents I see in the church, and I've always wondered to the Lord. I said, yes, you make families, you make husbands, wives, and you make families. But when you have children, they don't come out with a manual. They don't come out and say, listen, section 2, page 10 to 50, that's the important one. God told me, read that one. So there's no manual. But there's not meant to be a manual for nobody, because it's meant to be, I think, in the church. And it's one thing I've never also, chatting about this, it's been a foundation I've seen for 20 years. But you seem to have got it right as an eldership to be consistent amongst the elders, that the foundations are the foundations. And genuine family, fatherhood, critical is a requirement, not negating any other role, but fatherhood seems to be consistent. And that's coming from a flawed church environment and a different church environment. Those are not easy things to maintain. And you've got different ages, you're passing it on as well. That's not an easy thing to get right, which is probably a question,
A question,
How did you get it right?
It's
never perfect.
It's never perfect. It's never perfect. But honestly, it is as close as it comes, I would imagine. And I'll say this. First and foremost, I've said this in many different contexts. I've often been invited to NCMI events where, guys are asking, how do you manage as an elder in the business world, in the workplace? Most guys tend to be sort of full-time paid by the church. And I've always said, Tony makes it easy to serve. Tony is first and foremost, you touched on that word, genuine. He is as genuine as they come. What you see is what you get. And so there is no requirement, there is no pressure, there is no false persona that being on eldership with Tony creates. If you're sensible, and I think he's also gathered around him other men, other elders that see that quickly, and so we are relaxed. as individuals with our flaws.
Yeah.
Because he leads by example, and so there's no pressure to be who you are not.
Yeah.
I think that's very helpful.
Yeah.
I think in life that's very helpful. In the business world, people are constantly putting on a persona, right? You're trying to project something. You're trying to be someone. You're trying to impress. Serving on the eldership at FCC, there is absolutely no pressure. I think that's one point. The second point is, it used to be a much held view and Tony used to say it a lot, but I think it's now kind of already become ingrained in the DNA of the church. But friendship before function. You remember that phrase?
Yes.
Friendship before function. So I think primarily we have built these very, very tight and close personal friendships that are almost, the function is irrelevant.
Yeah.
Right? So once you get
That's
to that point, you can genuinely hold each other accountable.
Yeah.
You can genuinely want the best for each other. You can genuinely, be sounding boards, for the church, for doctrine, for governance in the church, but also for life, for raising kids, for doing different things, for business, lots of things, as you know, we often bounce things off of Tony from a business standpoint. So that is powerful. It's very powerful. And I'd say the last thing is God's grace. It's not always easy to find a bunch of guys that you get along well with and who you walk with over a long journey of life.
Yeah.
So I think of Ron and Ron and sort of Nadia were they reached out to us, Alan and I, as a kind of young couple in the church, and they were deliberate in building the relationship. And so those kind of things, I think it's just been God's grace leading and guiding and kind of blowing his wholeness and life on the church. Yeah.
It's such a subtly valuable point, that friendship
before function.
Because a lot of churches, it's function
Absolutely.
and role and program
Absolutely.
and is God there? And then there's very little friendship or function or an ability to weather the storms of life because they're going to come. And you need the friendship. And then the other thing I wanted to ask, what I find similar between you and I, and there are other men and women in the church who mix this, but it's church, family, business, and probably even some other roles. And when I say business, it's employing people in the church into the business, or family members into the business. It's being a role in the church. It could be a home cell leader, or a deacon, or a elder. And then there's family, your father role, and other roles that we have. Have you learnt to navigate the snares? Or is there any advice you've got, like the top 3 or 5 things that allow people to balance and keep their eyes on the Lord? Because that's often the biggest thing as well.
I think the biggest challenge for us as men is I can't remember, I think it was Mark Gango, one of those comedians that we did. Do you remember in the early days when we those,
watch the
the nothing box and that whole story.
The woman, the boxes are just connected. the guy's got the nothing box, and we hold it in high regard.
Exactly. I think the trouble for us guys is we're somehow wired to compartmentalize. So we compartmentalize our emotions.
Yes.
We compartmentalize our, every bit of our life. This is my fun box, and this is my work box, and and the challenge with that is that it creates all this internal tension, because on the one hand, I am a business leader. I run a business, and so I can box my life into that and be that guy. And then I can be in a context that is church, and okay, now I'm that guy.
Yeah.
And then, I'm hanging out with my friends, and we're at the rugby, and then I'm that guy, right? And that's very challenging. It's very, very challenging for us as men to live that sort of divided life. And there's lots of inconsistencies that come out of that. So one thing that I have found very helpful for me is I try and mix the whole thing.
Yes.
I've removed the compartments to the extent I can. I've completely removed the compartments. And, I am a dad, And I'm a dad when I am in the middle of a board meeting or when I am at church. I am a dad. And so I ensure that there is as little compartmentalization as possible. I first and for now I've got my 3 kids who are active in the church, and so I'm an elder in the church, and therefore I have some responsibilities to bring discipline as an elder in the church because they are in the church, right? And when I'm speaking to them, or if I feel like there's things that they're saying or doing, I remember one time, Bongani, when he was a teenager, he was posting some unsavory stuff on Instagram, and he was found out by Karina, right? Right, yes. Karina Sivright or Johnson now found out, and she reported him. She spoke to her dad, and then she spoke to me, and so we called Bongani to a meeting. And this was like, you are a young man in the church, and we're now speaking to you as elders in the church, notwithstanding that I'm also your dad, and so then you come to the business world, and like you, I have had the interesting dynamic of employing people that have been in the church or have ended up in the church. So today, one of my partners at Sango is in the church, is a member of the church. And so there is all of these different dynamics. We used to have another guy who's now since emigrated to another place, and he used to be in the business. We used to have a lady at our front desk who is still in the church. She left our farm, but she's still in the church. So I've had all of these experiences. So in a sense, at the office, it's a slightly different role, but I'm the same person. I try to the extent that I can to be the same person. I'm the same guy that you saw on stage on Sunday morning, and the same guy that you're seeing in the boardroom, and the same guy with my kids, and so on. And what that helps me to do is it allows me to remain true. If you do that, if you remain true to who you are, and you remain true to what you believe, ultimately people begin to see you as somewhat uniform. I remember once we contracted a guy in the church, Paul Dale, to come and film an event that we have in Cape Town. And I was leading the event with my partner and so on. And I remember Paul at the end of the thing, he said to me, it's so interesting to see you in the business context. I'm so used to seeing you at church on a Sunday morning. It's so interesting to see you in the business context. And my heart sank because I thought he's going to say, you're such a...
What happened, Charles?
Exactly. Well, you're a contradiction.
Yes. I was expecting that.
Correct.
Sorry.
Correct. But I think for me the greatest compliment was he said to me, and honestly, there is just no difference between the guy that I'm used to seeing at church on a Sunday and the guy that I saw in the context of your business colleagues and partners and your sort of ecosystem. And so that's my sense, is that I have consistently tried to break down this idea that there are compartments in life. I try and be the same consistently as I can. And so employing people in the church then becomes, you know me, this is what I stand for. It's the same thing I stand for at church, it's the same thing that I stand for in the business.
So boundaries.
You go for it.
So similar to you, just speaking about boundaries, it's actually a very good question Tim raises. Let me just give you context in my world. So over the 25 years, I'm entrepreneurial, as you know, and built a number of businesses. In those businesses, we've got family. As a matter of fact, Claire, the business that I started, my wife runs. She's really the CEO of one of the businesses. And I no longer am involved. But in that business, we've got family. Kieran, Mark, Christy works in there, Tristan works in there, and friends. Church, a lot of 50%, probably 40 to 50% of that business of the team is actually from Fourways. So we've had to build boundaries and perceptions around that. So we've got family boundaries and perceptions. Church, even in home cell, there could be a mix of family, business people, and church people. And boundaries are very, very important. But one of the things is there's not rules. They are, you've got to, I think I found, You have to be genuinely who you are. I love you allowed to be mixed, because as soon as you compartmentalize, it goes astray, and you try and control and have different boundaries or different rules. Be genuinely consistent. And then the boundaries I picked up, I've got another word for it. It's almost you've got to understand role. And it's a bit of that, is it friendship role? Is it a family role? Is it a functional business role? And it's quite bizarre, because I might have I did lead a part of that business for some time. And my son-in-law heads up a division, you know what I mean? But if we disagree on something, I've got the final vote in the business, and I've got to be okay. That might happen on Friday. On Sunday, we're entering a church, or I'm in a home cell meeting. He is an elder in the church.
Right, wow.
And I have
what a dynamic.
And the age difference is enormous. Yeah. And I've got to realize that God has placed him there. He's also placed me here. Yeah. He's built this specifically for us to deal with what, and my function is to obey. And not just obey, but he takes the role, the senior role. And the same is with Tony. We've had an agreement because we found
you're in-laws now.
Yeah, well, that's another good point. We're in-laws now, but even before in-laws, we were drawing people from the church into the business. The first thing I did is I went and asked Tony, is that okay? Let's get a relationship going and permission. Yeah. I don't think there's a single person that has come into the business without Tony's guidance, because he deals with people. The church is people, so his skills in people management, and then added his faith and in God, is just unbelievable. But I find if you want to balance because there's some complexity in that, having staff members, family members, church, is you've got to build respect and humility. Tony, I go to Tony, I say, listen, the business, give me advice. Yeah. The people, give me advice. He'll come to me, say, Stu, I'm going to speak to your family. I'm going to speak to your kids. They've come to me. We never talk about specifics. He never tells me if one of my kids go, but he'll tell me. Yeah. Stu, I'm chatting to one of the kids. I said, please give them the advice. Right. There's no need to tell me anything unless there's we do that with whether the person is or the team is from the church and in the business, in the family. And it's an unusual dynamic, but I feel that people sometimes are not willing to be exposed to that, because there's vulnerabilities.
We're afraid of the vulnerability, of the potential hurt, the difficult conversations.
Yeah. So I don't know if that answers it, Tim, but that's what I picked up, and maybe you can guide as well, Charles. I mean, boundaries. What are the boundaries?
I don't. It's a tough question, and honestly, if I'm being genuine, I probably err on that side of I'm afraid. I'm afraid to bring people that are close, into certain circles, because, one old business gentleman once said to me, don't do business with people who are your friends, because the next thing you have to bullet them, and now you've been inviting them to your house for dinners and whatnot. It's tough advice, and I don't really agree with it, but honestly, I do have that, if we build strong with these people and then things fall apart, there's always that concept.
And for me, they have fallen apart. So there situations that have caused things to fall apart, either people in the church and in the business, or it's been pressured, from a family perspective. It's not plain sailing. So, not that it's bad. You try and maintain all the relationships indefinitely and before God, but it's not easy sailing. And so I think that's a good fear to actually have, because it guides. That's a good fear.
I also, I used to say a long time ago, don't mix friendship and money, business, and so on. But it's actually not true. I mean, today, Sango Capital is effectively my business partner, and we've been friends for a long time. And in fact, I think our relationship has grown that much stronger because we are partners in business. We've been through, some real struggles together, and I have a ton of respect for him that has only grown over the years as we've worked together. So yeah, I don't think there's any simple answer, Tim. I think there's many different ways of handling it, and you will be disappointed sometimes. You will get it wrong sometimes, and many times you'll get it absolutely right. You just have to live, I think, with a degree of integrity. I think that's important.
Can I? Yeah. Well, I wanted to add one thing to that, because we're men here talking.
Yeah.
Not excluding the ladies, because I can't. If I had to get onto that subject and the value of Claire and family and spouses, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So we can even chat about marriage if we.
Yeah.
But what is it in the church where there's a focus on manlyhood, and almost what I call it a right manlyhood in a Christian faith-based context? Because man, have I seen in my church experience churches get it wrong, where the role of the man is insipid. The church is really led, because there's such commitment in the ladies, because they are faithful, and it's church is not seen. I'm struggling as a man to mix my beer drink, having a beer and a glass of wine at a soccer stadium or whatever with my mates, my past, my business, and now I've got church. It's a weird dynamic. But there seems to be a genuine, manly, Christian, godly element that's been built here, which I recognize fundamentally. But that's also not easy.
It's not easy, and it's controversial.
Yes.
It's controversial. I think the world demands a uniformity between men and women that is not in God's ordained order. I think we constantly talk about we are created equal, men and women, created completely equal in value and worth. But we are not uniform in function. We're not uniform in function. And the minute you get that wrong is trouble starts. In the church, in the home, and in most other spheres. So ultimately, we need to, and I think we've contended for this, and again, full credit to Tony that leads strong on this area. We've contended for the biblical manhood and womanhood. We've contended for the biblical roles of the man and the biblical role of the woman. There is no inferiority. There is no secondary nature in that relationship. We are created equal, but God in His wisdom has ordained that we have different functions. So if I chose to play the role that my wife has been given in our home, I will create dysfunction in the home. If I abdicate my role as the father in the home, I will create dysfunction. In the church, if we mix up the roles, and as you say, and as you travel around and as you encounter different churches, you see this, where the men step back from their role and the ladies feel the pressure to step into that role, you find challenges in the church. There's no...
And the world demands...
Correct.
Has a completely different set of demands, actually, you're right, than what the biblical view is.
And the biblical pattern and model has been put there for our good.
Yes.
It's been put there for, it works. It works very well. And, I had this conversation recently with my son, who's sort of in his early 20s now, and he's navigating this whole question of roles and responsibilities, men and women and so on. And I was saying to him, if ever anyone tells you that the model that we've built creates weak, subservient women, just look at your mother. Look at the women around you in the church, and that should answer you immediately. There is a very, very clear difference in the roles that we play, and we need to contend for that. We need to fight for that in the church. We need to fight for that in our homes, and that's where a lot of the stability that the world craves and doesn't find comes from. One question, and I don't know if we still have, you guys got enough material, you still want to go? Yeah, so one question for you, Stu. This is one of my current struggles and challenges is, as I spoke about before, trying to be consistent. Trying to live consistently. I find that, especially the more senior you get, the older you get, the more people you influence from a business perspective, the more challenging it is to share your faith and live your kingdom principles. Now you're having dinners with ministers. Where does your faith and kingdom and what you believe come into the story and into the conversation?
Sure, it's a good one. I'll tell you what I think it's not first. In being a Christian business, church-based father, family figure. Yeah. It's definitely not, when engaging in business, ministers, other people, if it's in business, it's business. So the business principles come first. I'm not there to preach or bring my faith into it quickly. And I advise people not to do that, because I find as soon as you do, you actually are misrepresenting your faith. Your faith is your personal relationship with God. It comes out inevitably, because if I am in business and I get to know a client, staff member, government ministers, they will know that, I'm a family man. I think the institution of marriage is the best thing in the world. As a matter of fact, if you want to go to an institution, go to marriage. That's the best place for your life. You will find, I will talk that I can't do that because I've got home group, or I've got home Bible study. Right. I will get into a conversation around marriage, which I did last week. And this businesswoman actually said, I know, because she's strong. She's a red character. She's a forceful, which God made her like it in business. And people misunderstand her. And she said, no, I know I've got to submit to the men in the business. And I said, hold on, wait a minute, because she's a Christian. And I found out only by stating my faith and my understanding of the scriptures says a wife should submit to their husband. There's no... back to that equality. Correct. You're actually, if you're in a more senior position as a woman, you actually don't need to be submissive. You can be more demanding because of your role, the business role. But back to your point, so I don't advise to push faith and religion, because it comes out as religion first. It should be in relationship and demonstration. It's the best way, especially when you're mixing friendship, family, business elements. And then lastly, I find I get guided by God. There are times
when to speak,
when He says speak,
be quiet, and
then I didn't, and I go, oh Lord, I've got to. He'll find He's got everything under control. Yeah, but then there's times that I speak, then I shouldn't have spoken, because it's the pearls before swine and things. It's like, no, wait a minute. You try to do that. That's your strength. It's not God's way, and He finds the most unbelievable ways. I also don't go, are you a Christian? Because I'm a business Christian person, so we must do Christian business. It's flawed. It'll sink your business before you can say Bob's your uncle, because somebody's going to get money wrong, and money is not meant in relationship with God. It's a secondary function, but in business, it's a primary function, So it's those. It's I don't know if I'm even answering the question.
It's very good, Stu. Very, very good. Absolutely.
And it's a personal journey, but I'm constantly fascinated by the Bible. I go back to the Bible. That I'll give you an example. I spoke at home group the other day. It was Luke 7. 4 stories in Luke 7. The first one was the Roman centurion whose aide got sick. And halfway there, he sent more, don't come, I'm not worthy, just, I send commands. And And Jesus says to him, the Roman centurion, a man of faith that I've never seen in Israel. He never even meets him. But the Roman soldier is an oppressive system on the culture of that time. So mixed in there is governmental relationships, business constitutions and things like that, command and control systems, and then faith. The Bible is very, very good at balancing kingdoms, business, family, friends, principles. It is incredibly powerful. It's secretive, and you have to go and delve into that, and you can't make it a religion, so you must be guided. But it's a book on life. So, and business is just part of life. And that's how I see it. I don't know if you agree.
Fantastic. No, fantastic. Yeah. Completely agree, and very helpful. I mean,
and sorry, my last point is guilt is not it's not part of the equation. So I have had to learn. I go, oh Lord, I'm so guilty. I'm coming to you again. I didn't witness. I didn't. Right. God saves the world. He sent His Son. He uses us, but we are. It's a trick of the devil almost, that we should feel guilty because we didn't know. Wow, we are free to make mistakes and learn in our journey with God, and He's got it. That's how I see it.
That's good. I do struggle with that guilt sometimes. I find myself in very interesting, strange places in countries where, different religious systems, irreligious people.
Yes, yeah.
And often you struggle with that guilt.
Yeah.
What should I be doing? Should I say it? Should I have done this? No, very good, Stu. Very good and very helpful.
Thanks.
Very helpful.
Yeah.
Happy?
That is us.
Good.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap. Very good. I don't think I've ever sat for an interview with no script.
Yes.